We good? We good? Talking The Last of Us? Alright, let's see. We got anyone here? Alright. We had some technical difficulties. We're gonna start at 10:30, but for some reason I had a weird staticky noise going on here. But yeah, let's just get right into The Last of Us. So let's talk about it. So yeah, this is based on my absolute favorite video game of all time. I think I want to try on Saturdays to try to make I do a live stream, just playing the game, just talk some news. Cause I want to play through the remake, part 1 remake, because they just did that relatively recently to hype up this show. I know that's why they did it, but from the ground up, it was excellent. Just like when I plug in that game and I see what I used to play on PS3, I'm like, this is one of the best remakes I've ever seen for one of the best video games of all time. And then we fast forward to a few days ago, where this has been a show I've been unbelievably hyped for. Like, one, I was not huge on the casting of either Pedro or can't remember her name. But the girl who plays Ellie, who used to play Lady Mormont in Game of Thrones. Obviously, Pedro was also in Game of Thrones. But yeah, I like Pedro. I was really cool with. I wasn't too sure with the Ellie casting, but based on what I saw, I'm like, she's kind of killing it. I think she's kind of killing it. Like, she gets that attitude to a T. But Pedro, like, he owned this first episode, absolutely killed it. Like, for starters, like, you start up with the episode. Sorry, I'm just such a fanboy of this whole universe, and when it gets right into it. But what's crazy is that it has the difference between the show and the game. At least with the game, it's right into it. Like, you meet Joel, you meet Sarah, you meet Tommy. But with this, it opens up with this, like, like, late night talk show where you have like some scientists on there talking about like infections and disease and whatnot. And there's one scientist who's talking about like fungi and all that stuff, how it can just absolutely like the idea that like there's LSD, there's psilocybin, there's all that stuff, and how it can just completely warp your brain and turn you into something that you're not. And that's a deadly thing. I really like that idea of this scientist just, there's just this talk show moment, right? Where this guy is speaking absolute scientific fact on like, what if this was to happen, right? But that was like, that's what's great about the show. It was filmed in this was a 60s event, like 1968, and it fast forwards to 2003, where we meet Joel, we meet Sarah, we meet Tommy. The concept is ridiculous, Harris. I know it. Like, it's just like that whole intro. Before I get into like obviously the epilogue or the prologue, I mean, excuse me, but before we get into that moment, you just have this talk show. I'm like, this is something like I could imagine just watching on television. I'm just like, holy shit! Like when you have that, there's a certain shot where it's like it's focused on this guy just talking about the fungi for a while, and like how like serious this can be instead of just some disease where it completely warps your brain, and how it zones in on like on how your brain is less active, so it keeps you alive but barely, and stuff like that. But then it gets to a point where it zones in on the audience, and they're like, just how their reaction was. I'm like, holy cow! Like they're just zoned into what this guy is talking about, because like this is terrifying stuff. And I'm like, this has been like I like with this pilot, or this first episode of this series. I'm like, they conveyed how like this isn't like a jump scary or like a you know what I mean? Like when it comes to modern horror or whatever, it's like very jump scare, very like whoa in your face. Like this was like haunting stuff. And there's another part later on in the episode where I'm like very like zoned in on. Um, but just like when I hear this guy talk about this disease or like fungi, I'm like, my reaction like watching this was identical to that audience where it's like they're all just, what are you talking about, dude? He's like, and when it gets to the point where it's like, what happens? What happens? It's like we lose, and then it just cuts. It cuts, and it's amazing. I think it's really amazing. Um, then it cuts to 2003, where we meet Sarah. She wakes up, and like you just know from the get go what the dynamic is between her and her father, where it's like he's just working his ass off, like grinding every single day just to put food on the table, make sure his daughter can have a good life. And you know, her, like to her, she's like, "This is my best friend. I never get to see him, never get to see the guy." But he wakes up and he's just like, well, she wakes up a little bit before his alarm goes off, and she's like, you gotta get up, dude." But he works his ass off, like doing construction and whatnot, right? Then it's his birthday. I agree. Harris just put in the chat. I've never like you've never played the games. I agree, but like making it from 2003 to 2023 is nice because it makes it feel like wow, it's like right now, like where we're at in the show, like after the prologue, right? I agree, but again, like this connection between this daughter and her father, it's like this is a best friendship. Like they love each other like to a T, and but like it's his birthday. She's like, I'm making pancakes, I'm making eggs for you and whatnot. Just like I loved that chemistry between this daughter and her father, where he's just like his shirt's inside out. She's like, hey, check that. And her uncle's over, and he's like, oh, he's losing it. He's losing it. Like he's getting old. This is an old dog, but but it's just a good dynamic, right? Well, it's nice, like you know that like she still tries to be a good person. She goes to her neighbor's house to talk with like just you know the older neighbor, you know, just bake some cookies, just be a good person. She has to go, like she gets dropped off at school, but she has to take the bus home because her dad's just working insane hours. It's his birthday and he has to work a double just just to make sure he can keep paying like payments on the house. His brother is obviously like his brother is just a little bit of like not responsible per se. I mean he is, but like also not. I've realized that I believe he's a. I'm trying to remember from the game. I know in the show, at least, it was a bumper sticker on his truck. I believe it was his truck since he was driving the whole time, right? That he was a vet. He was a vet, so obviously his life's just messed up. He's probably been on the sauce too much. And Joel's like, "Here's a job. We have to do this job. Like it's just a construction work, right?" But anyway, he has to go to work and Sarah has to go to school, right? But like you can tell like throughout the whole day that things are just slowly escalating. And when he's at this or when Sarah leaves school, she goes to fix up her father's watch as a birthday present because he's like he obviously has no time to do anything because he's just working his ass off just to make sure there's food on the table and a mortgage payment, right? And so he doesn't have time just to fix a watch, and she's like, she cares so much. She's like, this watch actually means something to him, right? And she goes through this little, you know, like for most cases when you have to like fix up a watch, like fix the battery or whatever, right? Like it's gonna cost a little bit of money. Like it was a $20 payment, you know, nothing crazy. Um, but while this guy at the store is like fixing this watch, his wife just comes in, is like, we're closed. We have to go. Cause like while Sarah is in this store, like these cars are just constantly like they're police like, you know, police cars, right? They're just constantly driving by and she's like, it's been like this all day, like and she just goes up to Sarah like, you have to go. Right, Harris. Like I agree. I'm an honest thief. You were never gonna fix it yourself. That's a great line. It's an unbelievable line because it's like it's true. This guy's just working himself like a dog, and his daughter is the one low key looking after him while he's doing everything he can to make sure she has the best life possible, but she misses her best friend, you know? And it's a beautiful thing. But like again, so while she's at this store, this wife of the owner or whatever is just like, we're closed. You should go home. Go home. Like she's like, get out of here. It's like when you're just watching the stuff go down, it's like, oh, something's going on. Like, why are there all these cop cars just coming constantly? Constantly all day. She eventually gets back to her place, but she promised this neighbor that she would bake cookies with her later, right? And this was, again, there was only like two truly terrifying scenes in this episode, in my opinion. In my opinion, again, it's just the whole intro. The whole intro sequence was absolutely terrifying. Like if you watch that on the news, like today, you're losing your mind, right? Um, but again, she goes to this lady's house. She's taking care of her very old mother, like probably in her 90s, and this lady's already like in her 60s, maybe 70s even. And but she's like, oh, I just want to bake some cookies, you know. Oh, chocolate chip, no raisins, and she's like, that's not what I want to make, but whatever. I'll give you some company, give you the time of day, right? And while she's just in this house, you see this, like the mom, right? Like this old woman, like 9 years old, just freaking out in the background. I'm like, this is terrifying, right? I think it's absolutely like, I'm like, whoa, this like stuff I remember like seeing in like It, for example, like It. I want to say chapter 2 or something, like when Jessica Chastain was in her old apartment, and you see this crazy woman in the background doing like crazy stuff, right? It gave me that type of vibe, but like this woman's just sitting in the background, you know, her mind is going with whatever this disease is, and it's because they got infected from being at the like downtown hospital all the time or whatnot, and you can tell she's just losing it. In that moment, I'm like, oh man, it's all building up for it to just explode, right? Like, I thought that was a truly terrifying moment because she's just blurred out in the background, just mainly focused on Sarah, but you just see this old woman just going nuts, right? I thought that was a crazy scene. Like, that was a scene where I'm like, whoa, like they're going full like psychological terror on this, and again, she's like, okay, I gotta go. I promised my dad I'd be home for his birthday. Her just, you know, obviously just being like, I don't really want to be here, like, but I want to be, you know, nice, you know, help out. Um, anyway, she eventually gets home, and you know, she's just doing her own thing. She borrows this movie from this older woman, because one of her dad's favorite movies, right? Um, eventually she gets home, and then her dad, he promised her Joel, right? So Joel's the man. Just an absolute dog, an absolute mule. Like he's just working his ass off all day. It's his birthday, and he promises her earlier in the day before he leaves for work. Like he's like, I'll be home by 9 at the latest. She's like, you promised to get a cake. He's like, I promise. We skip to the scene, which is straight from the video game, completely ripped out of the video game, where they're sitting on the couch. They're about to plug in this movie, watch it, and he gets home, he's just tired, he's beat. He's like, he doesn't even care that's his birthday, but she does. Like that love there is beautiful. Um, but anyway, they're sitting on this couch, and she's like, it's 10. So he's already late to his birthday to hang out with his daughter. And she's like, where's the cake? He's like, I forgot. I forgot. She's like, you promise tomorrow or you don't get your present. I was like, that chemistry, it's so good. It's so good. And he's like, I promise tomorrow I will get the cake. She's like, all right, here's your present. Gets the watch. You know, I'm an honest thief. He's like, where'd you get the money for this? Or he like puts the watch up to his ear. He's like, you sure you fixed this? And she hears it. She's like, you're funny, because she did fix it, which is straight out of the video game. And but then he just goes, where'd you get the money for this? It's like, I sell drugs. I sell hardcore drugs. And I'm like, this is ripped right out from it. And it's like, that's what, of course, there's a lot more to this episode. So much. But this is ripped straight from the video game. and I know I've seen a few people talk about this, and it's like with most video game adaptations, like I know with like I'll bring up Uncharted and the Halo series for example. Like the Halo series was like strictly like fresh, new. You just have Master Chief, and that's kind of it. And like other stuff that makes it connected to the Halo universe, but it's like just take the first game and just go from there. Like it was the same with Uncharted. It's like they made that a mix of all these games, like, and all these people in their heads are like thinking, "Oh, we've seen this." It's like no, not everyone plays video games or like has played these video games. So yes, you can appeal to that audience that has played it, but also still like there's a reason why people who have played these games love them, love them because it's a beautiful story and like great characters and all of that. If you just you continue off of that and you do what this show has done off of the first episode alone, you build off of the video game where you have all these moments that are in it, but you expand upon it where you get to know these characters on a more emotional and deeper level, and that's what makes it a great show so far. Like again, like in the game, we don't see like you don't see Sarah going to school, you don't see her going to this neighbor's house, but this builds so much more. Like this is a great person, and then she goes to the store to fix up the watch, and it's like this person loves her father, and he works like a dog, and that's what I really like about it. But yet you can still have this scene and a scene coming up later a little bit down the line that just blows my mind. And it did in the game and it did in this, but I'll get to that. But you're able to have these literally to a point scenes that just it hammers from the game. Like this, like that, just them sitting on the couch, like talking about his birthday, how he's been working all day, and how here's your present. I'm like, man, it's like I'm seeing a more the human element of this because I'm watching two people acting this out, and I love seeing that. Because even though like like playing The Last of Us Part One remake, I'm like this is a video game, but these models look perfect. Like this is one of the best looking video games of all time, but yet it still doesn't have that absolute human element that I love, like from a show, right? And that's what Uncharted didn't hit on, I would say, where it's like, yes, I like Tom Holland, I like Mark Wahlberg, but I didn't. I did at times, like I felt like, oh, I'm watching Nathan Drake and Sully, but in this, I'm like, I'm watching Joel and Sarah, and like these like, and again, this is my favorite video game of all time. So like all year, or once I saw the first trailer for this show, I'm like, I'm locked. I'm locked on what they are doing here. Because one, you have the guy who did Chernobyl, who's like, which knows the grand scale of things. Like when you watch Chernobyl, you're like, man, this is crazy. But then you still bring on the guy who made The Last of Us, so you know no matter what's gonna be a faithful adaptation, but you're still able to dive deeper into it because he knows it. Yes, Craig Nesbitt, he is the man. He is the man. Um, yeah. Anyway, so Sarah plugs in this. Oh, Neil Druckmann, dude. Like again, you watch or you play through The Last of Us, or you Neil Druckmann is a genius. I think he understands human nature. He understands like dynamic of humans, and he put it through video games, right? With The Last of Us and Last of Us Part Two, and then you have this show where it just brings that to live action, and he hits it. He hits it to a T, and he's like, okay, I love and know these characters. I know how to expand their background and their stories. Um, which again, we saw with Sarah primarily in this episode. A little bit with Ellie and a little bit with Joel and Tess later on. Tommy as well. Um, but anyway, so what I like is that, because I want to go through the episode as a whole, right? So they're watching. So or Sarah plugs in this DVD that she borrowed from her neighbor, which is one of Joel's favorite movies. Just like classic action movie, kind of like a John Wayne pick or something, right? And he's like, "You promise you won't fall asleep?" She's like, "Oh, I promise. I'm locked. I'm celebrating your birthday," and she's passed out. And what's beautiful is just like how everything in this prologue built up to the world just going to shit, right? Where in this scene, he gets a phone call from Tommy. And I love saying that it's 2003. Obviously, you don't have social media, you don't have your iPhones. Joel just has his old ass phone, right? So he gets the ring, he answers the phone. Tommy's like, listen, man, I'm in jail. I'm in jail. I need you to bail me out. And Joel's just like, God, my fuck up brother, right? Like I hate his guts, but I love him. I'm gonna take care of him. He's family, right? And I just loved how Tommy just explained the whole situation. It's like I don't know what like this guy just started going crazy on some people. I had to step in. I had to fight him, and I just got arrested. Right? I need you to bail me out. And Joel's like, fine. So he goes, and it kind of skips ahead a bit, right? Where Sarah gets woken up. Oh, gonna go back a little bit, which is a part I forgot about. Where before Sarah leaves her neighbor's house, right? She taught or there's this dog just sitting there. Like she obviously has a relationship with this dog. She's over at this house all the time. She knows its name. It's Mercy, and when she leaves, where you just see this dog just sitting there, just staring this old woman down. Like there's something wrong. Like there's something wrong there, right? Um. Anyway, so to go again to skip forward a little bit, Joel leaves to go get Tommy from the jail, right? And then she gets woken up to the dog barking and whatnot, and then she goes over to her neighbor's house again, and she goes in. Well, like she's trying to take her dog, like the dog, back inside, like it left the house. It's like I don't want to be in there. I don't want to be in there. And even the collar comes off. I'm like, whoa, okay. She goes in and she steps into the kitchen, and there's just blood all over the floor, and you see this guy just be like, "Help me!" And you see this old woman just start charging at Sarah. It goes outside, and you see Joel and Tommy there. It's like, "Get in the car," which shows how huge this experience is. Like, what's happening in this town and potentially the world at this moment. It's like, this is real. Get in the car. Leave them alone. And you get that quite a bit throughout the rest of this prologue, where it's like they're like there's neighbors. Like I love that Joel's automatically the man. Where like there's a neighbor coming out of their house, and he's just like, get back in the house and lock your doors, because he knows that this is a huge situation, right? Anyway, the same thing happens again. The same thing happens again when they're driving down the road. You see, like you get that fan service that people will say, and I'm just like, listen, it's not automatically fan service to have something from the game. It's just like it's a nice thing to see for those who are invested in the source material, right? Sure, you can classify it as fan service, but it's not like but it's like it's cool when you like they're driving down the road, you see this house on fire, they're trying to get out of Dodge. They're like, we are leaving, we have to go. We're trying even to go to Mexico because they live in Texas, so they're close to the border. Anyway, but they go again. It's just an infamous shot from the game, right? Where you're just driving past this house, you look at this house, and it's just on fire. It's like this is day one of the outbreak, and things are just immediately going to shit, immediately. And but even just driving past the house, right? Like okay, what Harris just said. Never played the game, and it didn't feel fan servicey. Like that's what's great about this show so far. Like it's like they have these moments that just hit because if you play the game, it's like you're watching this like through a certain medium. It's like I saw something earlier. It's like talking about Harry Potter or Lord of the Rings or whatever, right? Where it's like it's just taking this source material and put it to screen because you can read this stuff or play this stuff in a different form. Like again with The Last of Us, like I'm playing it, but just being able to watch it and sit down and just dive deep into it, you don't have to think that much about it. It hits differently. Where again, Uncharted and Halo didn't do that because it wasn't that close with the source material. Where Uncharted was, Halo kind of. But with The Last of Us, just having these, to me, fan servicey moments, it doesn't take away from like anyone who's never played the game. It's just a good show. it's just a good show. And I've always known this. I've always felt like you could easily adapt The Last of Us for on screen because it's very cinematic, yet the gameplay is a lot of fun. But anyway, like to go back to what I was talking about, like it shows how Joel's the man. Like he's like he knows like we just can't trust anyone, or like you still have to take care of your people. Like he's just driving down past this firehouse, which again is fan service 'cause it's directly from the game. But I don't like the term fan service. I'll get off this point, but it is. I will say it is because if you play the game, it's like, oh, I know that house. I know what I'm seeing here. And then same like immediately after that, he drives like Tommy's driving this truck, and there's people on the side of the road like, please pick us up, and Joel's like, just keep going, just keep moving, and like, and Tommy's like, dude, like they have a kid, and he's like, and Joel's like, we do too. This is direct dialogue from the game, and like they just haul it past these people, and Sarah's like they can go in the back. Like this is direct dialogue from the game, but it hits me hard. Like I played this game so many times, but to watch it with these, like you have Pedro, you have these actors who are just these human beings that get to like show how good they are at their jobs by taking these models from a video game and bring it to life, and that's what I really love about this show. Anyway, so they eventually get downtown. This is where things start to heat up, or not like downtown-esque, right? I just remember once they get to the highway and it's just completely packed. People are driving the wrong way down the highway, and Joel's like, dude, just get off road. We'll go this way, all right? And Tyler's like, all right. And they get downtown, and you see how there's just these zombies, like fungi people, right? Infected. Just like, and you see like just attacking people, and you see hordes of regular people like you or me just going nuts in the streets. And like a piece that hit me that was good, like not maybe it's foreshadowing, but just how like these airplanes were so low to the ground. It's like obviously like this stuff is happening in the sky too, where it's like this stuff is low. Like you can't land at the airport, which is a completely heavily populated area. So I just remember like they're just in the truck, and you just hear these airplanes just like fly right over, and Sarah has to cover her ears and stuff like that. It's like, wow. Then it goes back to that where they're in this downtown area, and like this airplane just crashes down, which is different from the game, but this is a good difference. Instead of like them just, it was close to showing how like they almost got hit by another car, but they're like, let's go bigger, and like let's increase the scale of this by having an airplane crash down and debris just crashes into their car. And that's where we get to where this is getting messed up, where you have Tommy and Joel and Sarah, like the car crash, they get separated from Tommy. It's a little different from the game, but it's very nice. But again, Sarah still messes up her leg, so Joel's like, can you run, can you walk? She's like, no. He has to pick her up, and she's like, what's happening to Uncle Tommy? And I'm like, all right, we're getting to the tearjerker part. Joel has to carry her, and then there's an infected chasing them, and they're able to get through it. But that scene was nuts, though, where there's running through the diner, and Sarah's just terrified. Her legs are, or her foot's already messed up, and before getting into the crazy part of this episode, I thought this was the best part of the episode. They did so well compared to the video game, but I'll get there. We're close. But I just wanted to touch a little bit on how this zombie, or I don't like calling them zombies because they are, but they're not. But just this infected human, right? It's just like the way they move is terrifying. Like they're just so like cracked out, basically. Like they are like high as shit, but they're just hungry for human meat. But like I liked seeing how this thing was just like hauling, like jumping all over everything just to get to these people in the diner scene. I'm just like, that's a terrifying shot, in my opinion. Anyway, they're able to get out of there, and they're able to get outside, and they hear like gunshots to take out that infected. And it's a military, and like Joel's like, Dude, all right, we've been through hell, which is this whole sequence is straight from the video game, and it's my favorite scene in anything because again, it's my favorite video game of all time, and anytime I watch or play this scene in the game, I am at loss for words. It hits every time, and the performance from Troy Baker in the game, like the way he talks to Sarah. Anyway, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. So they, in the show, this military guy is like calling in. It's a little different in my opinion. So he's calling in, being like, "Yes, I have two civilians." Joel's just explaining how we're not sick. My daughter just messed up her leg, but he's obviously getting a call from his like superior, being like, "Take them out. Doesn't matter," which is fucked. Um, what sucks in the video game, I just know like the military guy was a little bit more hesitant at first. He's just like, when talking to his superior, he's just like, he has he has a little girl or whatever, and then it's like, all right, yes sir. Where in this it was just yes sir, yes sir, yes sir, which still hits. It still hits, but it's still like him just being like, he has a little girl. Like, I can't do this. Where it's obviously what it's building up to something traumatic. Where he starts to lay down fire. Where Joel's like, no, no, and then of course they get hit, rolls down a hill. I love the shot where it's just Joel laying on the ground and there's the flashlight with the gun. And Joel's like, please don't. But what I like about this is where the soldier's like, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. So that hit. I still think it hits that same like feeling of like he does not want to do this, obviously. But it's literally identical shot for shot how it looks with the flashlight on Joel. He's like, no. And then Tommy comes in and just pops the guy. And where Joel's like relieved at this moment. But then you hear Sarah panting and wailing, where it's like, oh shit, she got hit. Where Joel, well, what's crazy is Joel's just like, he's checking himself. He's like, he just got grazed, which I believe is a difference from the video game, where you don't really see that. Where it's kind of just like, oh, Joel just kind of got off scot free outside of like his watch getting messed up, which is still a thing. But he checks himself, and then you start to hear Sarah. You hear her, and like this, she's such a likable person. Like she cares so much for her dad. She was willing to go to her neighbors. That's what I really liked about the show. Like he dives deeper into like this character, this girl, who's just a good person. She got hit. She got hit, and then Pedro was incredible in this scene. Where I'm like, man, like it felt like I was watching the game again, but it's still Pedro giving this performance, as opposed to me like how I've seen Joel since since the game came out. But it's still, I'm like, I am watching this same thing, but I'm seeing Pedro do it, and he's killing it. I literally cried watching this. I cried like I was teary eyed. Like it was. And again, this is my favorite source material of all time. Besides maybe like, Star Wars or something, right? But this is a story about human beings just struggling. And how do you open it? You have a man who works his ass off his whole life to give his daughter a good life. And then the world goes to shit, and he loses her day one. So he becomes this hardworking, great man into what we see kind of more of a Sour Patch Kid, you know what I'm saying? Like he becomes more of a grouch, but he knows what this world is. He knows how terrible and terrifying it is. Because day one, he loses the love of his life. He loses his daughter in such a traumatic way by someone who should be protecting you when all this goes down. And he has to hold her and tell her it's gonna be all right. I have to pick you up. Yeah, she's just giving her last breaths, and when she just gives her last breath, I know I believe his name's Gabriel Luna, who plays Tommy, who's a good actor. I remember him. He was in Agents of Shield. He played Ghost Rider, right? I think his name's Gabriel Luna. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure. But when he just goes, Joel, he knows, like he's seen this because he's a war vet. I'm pretty positive that's what it is. Like he just knows, like she's gone, man. And when he just holds her close and he's just bawling, I'm like, this is identical to the game. It's just beautiful. And the thing is, I've only been talking about the prologue. Like this is only 34 minutes into the show, right? And it hit remarkably. Like I knew they had they had the hammer, the idea of what this world is within the first 34 minutes. Yeah, I literally know the exact timestamp so I can go back and watch that scene. That's how brilliant it is. And to it going to the point, or like, again, this is 34 minutes into an 80-minute episode. 80 minutes. So there's still, you have like basically 50 minutes left in this. And again, it's definitely less of like, I think the prologue did a better job in my opinion, but the second half did a good idea of like what this world is like 20 years later, because Sarah dies and you get that 20 years later timestamp, right, where you meet Tess, you meet Robert, you see what Joel is like, where he's kind of like a kingpin in a way, not really, but like he's like that guy, you know, he's that guy. It's like how Rick became that guy after the apocalypse, like in The Walking Dead. Joel was that guy, where he's just like, he's talking like these like basically the military at this time, but it's literally just it's like it's kind of the military, but again the government's not really a thing anymore, but it's but you get introduced to these guys. I think they're called FERPA, I'm pretty sure, and then you hear about the Fireflies, who are these terrorists, and we don't really meet them until a little bit later in the episode. I'll get back into that, but Joel's just that guy where he's just like, he's literally giving like pills to this military guy. He gets information. You see Tess get murked. He's just tight with everyone, where he's able to skip this whole line, have communication with his brother, who he hasn't seen probably in a while at this point. But the idea is that Joel wanted this battery so he can go find Tommy, because Tommy's his brother, right? He has to make sure he's doing all right. Wow. All right, Harris, I didn't know that. I heard it was so what Harris just said in the chat was that this was the second highest premiere in a long time for HBO, where House of the Dragon obviously beat everything, and where Harris just said that it literally doubled the viewership of the Euphoria season 2 premiere, which I know was huge, and that was the second. I guess it would have been the first until House of the Dragon, right? Which is kind of nuts. And that's crazy to me. Like, I don't even think this show had that great of marketing. It had really like great trailers, some good TV spots, whatnot, but I didn't expect it to be the second highest, most viewed thing on HBO. Like like a premiere? No way. I didn't think that. I thought this would be a show that had like insane legs, which it will. I know it will. Obviously House of the Dragon comes off like being like, oh, Game of Thrones, like we're back in a Song of Ice and Fire universe. But this is The Last of Us, which is like, to people who know video games, they know this is one of the best video games of all time. But to the general audience, just to put on HBO Max and see this and just want to put it on, wow. And I think this is gonna have a lot of rewatchability factors, or like a lot of newcomers coming in, because like after this first episode, like, you know, people are raving about it. It's also the highest rated at the moment, of course. Wait, hold on. I agree, Harris. It's nice to see after a long time. It's nice to see TV in theaters. Excuse me. It's nice to see TV in theaters kind of making a little bit of a comeback. Where you had House of the Dragon, you have this, and then you have Avatar for the theaters, where it's nice seeing people just ready to like dive deep into good material and just shut off their brains and just dive into this stuff. Trying to remember my point I was kind of going off of, but regardless, like to have a video game adapted TV show or miniseries, but I think they'll have a season 2 for what part 2 is, and then by that time there's going to be a part 3, and they'll probably do that too. So I see this being a 3-season show, because there's going to be 3 video games for sure. It's going to be a trilogy, you know. Anyway, I gotta get my train back on the station or on the tracks, but again, I'll just go back into the show itself because I lost my train. But anyway, that Joel's just that guy. He's just dealing some drugs. Where this Robert guy's like, your guy, I'm terrified of him, and Tess says that because he's trying to get a car battery to get to Tommy. We're like, all right, eventually they get to the point where like they have a job for me. Where he gets connected with the Fireflies, or this terrorist group, right? Terrorist group, where they're more like it's like a rebellion, kind of like Star Wars, where like this FERPA is kind of like the Empire. They're stationed everywhere, but it's not like in space, it's here, which is kind of a cool concept. But the Fireflies are just like, we just need to break out of what our world was and how the old world was. Which I've always loved that idea, where it's just like, we have to move forward. If the world went to shit, there's a reason for it. There's a reason for it. Anyway, this is where we get introduced to Ellie. Where we don't see Ellie until like at least 45 minutes into, at least like more than halfway into this episode, which is a long episode. And Ellie's the second main character of the show. But you meet Marlene, who is a Firefly who cared for Ellie, blah, blah, blah. And she's like, you have to protect this girl. You guys have to, like, your cargo, blah, blah, blah. Where Joel is just like, I don't care about you. I'm just trying to get you to a certain point. Now, this is where we get to a point where you have Joel and Tess taking care of this girl, right? Who's kind of a smart ass, she's snarky, and that's what I really liked about this girl's performance as Ellie. It's like she captured that, like how Ellie like was, and she did a great job. Like when I play the video games and I watch this, I'm like, okay, like when you're going through the whole scene where it's like, okay, count from 1 to 10 slowly, where she goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and she's like slowly, and then it goes like 6, 7, 8. Fuck you. It's like, this is Ellie. This is Ellie right here. Anyway, I digress. Regardless, we get to a point where Joel and Tess are escorting her out of this safety zone, right? And that's why people are going to lose their minds next episode. Because again, I know this point in the game, they're going to have to deal with these soldiers and whatnot. But they've seen nothing yet, because we've been you see the outbreak and what it's like, and then it goes to them in this safety zone, this quarantine zone, right? And then they're leaving it. And this whole pilot, this first episode ends with a beautiful shot of this skyscraper just basically just messed up. It's dark, it's raining. Perfect shot. This is a brilliant shot. But what I love is like what wants to bring you to the next episode is where you hear this howl, and then the clicks, and then there's a little piece that you can see in like the top left corner of your screen on top of like a little building. You can see a clicker, and the clickers are just these truly infected people who can't see anymore, but they have insane hearing, and they are more dangerous than just regular, like, infected. The second we see the first clickers, man, people are gonna start to be terrified what this show is, because, like, you see it in the trailers, like, and that's what's gonna be in the next episode, guaranteed, because they have to go inside the skyscraper and be in this, because by playing the game. Ooh, Great point, Harris. Great point. Like that reminded you a bit of that Rick shot. I agree. I agree. It just sets you up to like what this world is now. It's just not what it was. Like you see Rick, like compared to The Walking Dead, you see Rick walking into it, landing on the horse. Where this, you just have the rain, the lightning in the background, and you see this skyscraper demolished. It's like this world, where the world ended 20 years prior, as opposed to that being probably like a month. Crazy, right? Um, anyway, but in the trailer, you have there's a scene where I know like Joel just goes, because like with the clickers, they can't see, but they hear incredibly well. Where it's like you have to try to maneuver around them, which I think is a brilliant concept. Where you can have some intense moments, just like let's say you have Ellie step on like a little branch or something, and you just have a clicker just turn their head real quickly, right? It's something like that. Like it'll just be, like, it'll be nerve wracking for the audience, and I just ultimately this is just like one of um my favorite IPs of all time, you know. And I'm like this episode has truly brought this to life for me. Like it's been my favorite video game since it came out in 2013. I bought the remastered edition for my PS4, and I just bought the remake on PS5. It's my favorite story. These are some of my favorite characters to ever exist. Literally, my two favorite fictional characters. Well, I'll say my top three favorite fictional characters of all time are literally like Luke Skywalker slash Anakin Skywalker. I know that's a little cheating. Um, but that's father and son. That whole dynamic, I think, is brilliant. Put the film. But then I like Rick Grimes and Joel Miller are my favorite fictional characters of all time, because it's just these men who worked their ass off and went through shit in the real world, and then the apocalypse happens, and they have to become different breeds of human to keep the people they love most alive. And Joel, like he lost. That's the difference between him and Rick, where Rick did everything he could to protect those he loved. He lost them along the way. But Joel lost his daughter day one. So for 20 years, he didn't give a shit about anything or anyone except for maybe a few people. Yes, yes, right. Zombie stuff in Star Wars are my favorite genres. Um, just like post-apocalyptic slash Star Wars. That's what I want. Um, but Joel Miller loses his daughter, and he finally finds something that he doesn't care about at all, which is Ellie. And and that's what's going to be brilliant to those who have never watched or played, like never watched like cutscenes from The Last of Us the game or played through it. By the end of the show, you're going to love this dynamic between Ellie and Joel, where Joel falls in love with this girl like as a daughter, like a replacement daughter. Like there's nothing. It's so platonic. It's just this man wanting to protect this other person. That's the best thing you can do as a man, especially in the apocalypse. And the fact that the other thing about this girl is that she got bit weeks ago, and within hours you turn and she's okay. And that makes it quite the dynamic down the road. Trust me. But if you've never seen any gameplay or cutscenes from The Last of Us, I'm not gonna say anything. But this and the last episode are gonna be some of the highest rated things of all time. Like the last episode, I think will truly blow people's minds, and I can't wait for it. But yeah, I guess I think that's a good spot to leave off on. I'm so amped for episode 2. I think it's supposed to be a shorter episode. I believe only like 50 minutes, something in there. But again, I think it's just gonna be them just going through this building, which I understand does not have to be long. Yeah, Harry. It's not like, again, I know that you haven't played the game, man. Like it's just by the last episode, you're gonna be in love with these characters and this story and this world. I can't wait for you to witness it. And for anyone else who watches this and has not seen or played The Last of Us, I envy you. I'm not gonna lie, because I know where it's gonna go. But I like that we're going to get more along the way. And again, it's my favorite property. So it's going to be nice to see it in live action. But yeah, again, next week, I can't wait for it. I'm going to make sure to try to do this right after episode 2 on Sunday, because I know, like, after watching this first episode, I was immediately hooked and ready to talk about it. Just we had some, technical difficulties to not be able to do it until today. But yeah, I can't wait, guys. All right, so make sure to tune in on Sunday. I'm gonna do a live stream again and discuss episode 2 of The Last of Us right after it comes out. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed. I can't wait to talk more about this universe, but also tune in for Saturday. I'm gonna try to do at least a 30-minute to an hour video. I'll have some free time where I'm gonna I might just play through The Last of Us a little bit or something, whatever you guys want to watch. But we're gonna talk about news from the week about Star Wars, because we got a new Mando trailer, and then we got we're potentially getting some James Gunn news on the new slate of DC, which I think is possible by the end of the week, but we'll see. If not, there's always something to talk about, because we also had a new TV spot for Ant-Man, Quantumania, which is going to be nuts. But yeah, so tune in for that on Saturday. But all right, guys, it's been fun. No matter what, Sunday we're going to talk episode 2, so I'll catch y'all then. All right, bye-bye, guys.